All right, let's continue our journey into metaphysics. Remember, the question on the table for us: what is fundamental reality? In other words, what exists? And we've looked at a couple of different possibilities so far. One is that, well, maybe what exists are physical things, things like rocks and atoms and trees and computers. Matter is fundamental reality. Everything that exists comes from matter. Or on the other hand, we've looked at the possibility, well, maybe non-physical things exist, like spirits or souls or minds, a psyche of some kind. And if we come down on the position that reality is really at its core constituted by only one of these two things, we're monists, right? We think that reality is mono, like a radio speaker that's not stereo. It's mono. Reality is entirely made up of matter. Everything that has ever existed and will ever exist will be of matter. Because there's nothing else. Matter is fundamental to reality, we might say. We're physical things. On the other hand, we might take the position that no, actually, everything that we think of as matter is all an illusion. We're sort of plugged into the mind of God, or we're plugged into the matrix. But the things that appear to be real to us, physically real, aren't actually real. If we take either one of those positions, that reality is constituted entirely of matter or entirely of non-matter, or that's the wrong way to say it, non-physical things, we're monists, okay? But if we can accommodate both existing, both the physical and the non-physical, then we'd be dualists. We think reality is sort of dual in nature. And we've been exploring some arguments about this as it relates to our individual existences and the essences of who we are. Are we our bodies, or do we inhabit our bodies? Are we just a physical thing, or are we something more than that? And what kind of captures this really nicely is the movie Freaky Friday. Gotta watch the original, way better than the new one. But if you think about what's going on in this, it's in this film, even though it's lighthearted and ostensibly made for kids, it's grappling with this profound question about the nature of reality. Because in this situation, you have two people, a mother and a daughter, and the essence of who they are as individuals isn't confined to their bodies. It's not even defined by their bodies. They inhabit a body. And you can see that through some, freaky spell, the essences of who they are actually leaves one body and enters the other. And it does so without interruption and without changing the fundamental essences of their selves. And now they're actually inhabiting another body, and they can, with their minds, control that body. They can make decisions about what to do with this body. And you can clearly see there's this implication in the film that reality is dual in nature. And in fact, we might even make the argument that that film portrays the fundamental reality is non-material, because the bodies are arbitrary. The bodies don't have an impact on the way they experience their selves, right? Their sense of self. Of course, how the bodies are treated by others causes particular thoughts to happen and the kinds of experiences that they have. But they remain intact as themselves, regardless of which body they're in, which seems to put priority on that non-material self. Now, what this film is dealing with is actually called interactionalism in philosophy. And all interactionalism says is that this non-material self and physical body, they somehow are able to interact with one another. So that I have a thought about something, and then I can make a decision to move my arm over here and grab my can of water and say, aha, I wanted something. In my non-material mind, I decided to reach out and grab something to satisfy that need. So my mind and my body are interacting with one another, and they can causally affect one another, okay? So when someone comes up and hugs me, I have this physical experience. I have also an internal, kind of a mental experience or a mind experience that, just like in Mary's room, the thought experiment, you wouldn't be able to understand or access this experience I have when somebody hugs me simply by mapping my neurons or measuring the chemical experiences in my body. That's never going to get you to the experience that I'm having, this emotional experience that I may have when I experience this physical event. And again, this is this idea that my non-material self is interacting with my physical body. And it works in the opposite direction too, right? I have a desire to do something. I want to date somebody who's smart, somebody who's professional, a business person. And that desire is going to cause me to do certain things with my physical body in order to achieve that goal, right? So I'm going to dress in particular ways, avoid dressing in other ways. I'm going to say certain things and avoid saying other things. And I'm this desire that is coming from within is going to allow me to interact with my, or not allow me, it's going to interact with my physical body and cause it to start doing some things as a way of satisfying that desire that I have, right? So interaction between the non-material self and the material or physical body. But there's a question. Where does this interaction take place? And you can see here, hopefully, this is kind of funny terminology to even be asking, right? Because when you think about where or place, these are concepts that are in reference to physical objects and their locations. So where exactly does this interaction take place between my non-material mind and my physical body? And why is it that my body never seems to forget my non-material mind? It never, it doesn't forget it when I go to the store and get out of my car. I don't get into the store and think, oh shoot, I forgot my non-material self back in my car. No, these things seem to always, except in the Freaky Friday scenario, they seem to always kind of be located together. So what exactly is this interaction that's taking place, and where is it taking place? And this was a question that Descartes was confronted by. And he actually came up with an answer that's not half bad. And I won't go into the details here of his answer of exactly how this interaction takes place because it's really complicated and involves these little spirits and so forth. But if you take my Introduction to Modern Philosophy class, we would dig really deeply into that idea of Descartes and see how interesting it actually is. But the short version of this is that Descartes came up with this idea that this interaction takes place in a part of the brain called the pineal gland. And he said that because at the time, no one really understood what the pineal gland did. It's this little part of the brain near the stem. And nobody really understood what it did. So Descartes' like, well, that's got to be where the interaction's taking place. And that's why we can't see the interaction and identify what's going on in this pineal gland, because we're watching non-material things at work here. But nonetheless, Descartes' answer was it didn't really address the problem that the question is trying to raise, which is, how exactly do non-material and material objects interact with one another? And this remains today a problem for dualism, right? Where does this take place? How can it take place? How can a non-material mind, a non-physical mind, cause or initiate any kind of physical brain activity, right? How could that happen? Because it seems like physical objects are affected only by other physical objects, right? So you think about the folks that claim they can bend spoons with their minds, or lift things, levitate somebody off of a table. And it's like, well, it doesn't work that way. Our minds don't seem to exercise that kind of power in the physical realm. And so it seems to be a fair question. Well, how in the heck then does this non-physical mind interact with the physical brain? And where did the energy to cause this action come from? And where did it go, right? Because if you have an event taking place, the non-physical mind somehow having an effect on the physical brain, it would seem to require some amount of energy to have an impact on a physical thing, the brain. And it would seem like we'd be able to identify where that energy came from and then where it went. But we can't. So these remain problems for dualism. But nonetheless, you are still having to grapple with this question about what is most fundamentally real. And maybe think about it this way. There's two ways of thinking about who you are. One way is you have a body, right? And that's sort of the Freaky Friday scenario. I exist. The essence of myself is non-physical, and it is the possessor of a body. On the other hand, if you are a monist and somebody who believes that only physical things exist, then maybe you think, well, I am a body. I'm just a body. I don't have a non-material, non-physical self. I'm defined entirely by my physics, or I'm sorry, by my physical being. All right. So maybe that's something to start thinking about, right? What's the real you? Is the real you your brain? Is the real you your body? Is that all there is to you? Or do you have reason for believing that you are the possessor of a body? Okay? And that's the question that we're going to dig a little bit deeper into. Are you just a meat machine? All right?